Jax's revenge domain. The call came through at 2:47 a.m. while I was elbow deep in a control panel trying to fix a cascade failure that had shut down $18 million worth of precision manufacturing equipment. My phone buzzed against my hip. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again and again. I pulled off my work gloves and checked the screen. Pierce Hoffman, my direct supervisor at Titan Industrial Systems, calling from Chicago at what would be 1:47 p.m. his time. I almost didn't answer. When you're managing a production crisis costing $240,000 per hour in lost output, phone calls from corporate feel less urgent than the blinking fault indicators in front of you. But I answered anyway because that's what 28 years of being a reliable crisis manager conditions you to do. Mitchell speaking. Jordan, it's Pierce. I need to inform you of a company decision. Effective immediately, we no longer require your services as Senior Manufacturing Systems Engineer. Your employment is terminated as of today. My name is Jordan. Mitchell, I'm 47 years old and I just got fired while managing a manufacturing crisis that nobody else at my company knows how to solve. I looked at the control panel in front of me. Fault code 0x4A7C still flashing. Hydraulic pressure sensor 3 showing intermittent readings. Production line B completely offline along with lines C and D due to cascade protection protocols. Diana Foster, the plant manager, standing 6 feet away looking at me with desperate hope because I was literally the only person who understood the system well enough to diagnose failures this complex. I understand, I said, keeping my voice level. I'll inform the plant manager that you'll be handling the shutdown procedures for the crisis I'm currently managing. Silence long enough that I thought the call might have dropped. What crisis? The production line failure that brought me to Ohio yesterday. Lines B, C, and D are offline. The failure is costing approximately $720,000 per hour in lost production. I'm in the middle of diagnosing a hydraulic control system cascade failure. I assume you'll want to send someone else to complete the resolution since I no longer work for Titan. More silence. I could hear him breathing. Jordan, let's discuss this after you've resolved the Ohio situation. I don't think that's appropriate. You just terminated my employment. I shouldn't be working on Titan projects if I'm no longer a Titan employee. I'll brief Diana on what I've diagnosed so far and catch the next flight back to Chicago. Or actually, not back to Chicago since you said not to bother coming back to the office. I'll fly directly home to Michigan. Wait, Jordan, let me call you back. He ended the call before I could respond. Before I explain what happened over the next 48 hours, let me establish who I am and why that phone call was the most expensive mistake Pierce Hoffman ever made. The irony is, I'm the one who trained Pierce when he joined Titan 8 years ago. Kid was green as grass, didn't know a PLC from a PC. I spent months teaching him the fundamentals, covered for his mistakes, made sure he looked good to upper management. That's the guy who just fired me. I joined Titan Industrial Systems in 1996 as a manufacturing engineer specializing in automated production systems. Titan designs and maintains high-precision manufacturing equipment for aerospace, medical device, and automotive industries, where product tolerances are measured in thousandths of an inch, and production line downtime costs hundreds of thousands of dollars per hour. My role was troubleshooting complex failures in the automated systems that Titan built and maintained for clients. When a production line crashed and the client couldn't diagnose the problem, they called Titan. Titan sent me. Over 28 years, I'd responded to 420 emergency manufacturing crises across 18 states. I diagnosed hydraulic control failures, pneumatic system cascade errors, PLC programming bugs, sensor calibration drift, mechanical tolerance degradation, and dozens of other failure modes that could shut down multi-million-dollar production equipment. Most importantly, I developed deep institutional knowledge about the specific systems Titan had designed and installed. Every client had unique requirements. Every installation had custom modifications. Every system had quirks and edge cases that existed only in my experience-based understanding of how those systems behaved under stress. That knowledge was what made me valuable. That knowledge was also what Pierce Hoffman had just eliminated from Titan's available expertise at the worst possible moment. My wife Sarah had been telling me for 3 years that I should start my own consulting firm. "You're carrying that whole company," she'd say over dinner while I was describing another crisis I'd solved. "They should be paying you twice what you're making." I always brushed her off because I believed in loyalty. I figured if I kept doing good work, Titan would take care of me. Shows what I knew. My son Ryan, 24, works as a junior engineer at a competing firm. He'd been after me to jump ship and start our own operation. Dad, you've got more knowledge in your little finger than most engineers have in their whole career, he'd tell me whenever we went fishing together. Why are you giving it away to people who don't appreciate it? I'd always shrug it off. It's not about the money, son. It's about doing the job right and being someone people can count on. The Ohio crisis had started 31 hours earlier. Precision Components Manufacturing, one of Titan's largest clients, had called our emergency hotline at 7 p.m. Chicago time on Monday, reporting that 3 of their 4 production lines had shut down simultaneously. PCM manufactured advanced aerospace components for commercial aircraft. A single production line produced approximately $240,000 worth of parts per hour when running at normal capacity. 3 lines offline meant they were losing $720,000 per hour in production capacity. Every hour those lines stayed down was nearly $750,000 walking out the door. I spent 4 hours on a video call with PCM's maintenance team, walking them through diagnostic procedures and reviewing system logs. By 11 p.m., I determined this wasn't something that could be resolved remotely. The failure pattern suggested a fundamental issue with the hydraulic control system that managed precision positioning for all 3 affected lines. I booked a flight to Columbus, departing Tuesday morning at 6 a.m., called Sarah to let her know I'd be gone for a few days. Another crisis? She asked, and I could hear that familiar mix of pride and frustration in her voice. Pride because she knew I was one of the few people who could handle these situations. Frustration because it meant another disrupted week. Big one this time, I told her. 3 production lines down at PCM, they're bleeding money. How much money? About $720,000 an hour, she whistled. And Titan's sending just you to fix it? Who else would they send? Pierce doesn't know hydraulics from pneumatics, and Ryan Walsh is stuck in Germany for another 2 weeks. Maybe it's time you started charging what you're really worth, she said quietly. It wasn't the first time she'd made that comment, but it would turn out to be prophetic. I arrived at 8:30 a.m. local time and drove directly to PCM's manufacturing facility. Diana Foster, PCM's plant manager, met me at the facility entrance. She looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. Mr. Mitchell, thank you for coming. We've been offline for 31 hours. Our production schedule is catastrophically behind. Corporate is asking why we can't fix this ourselves. Because this failure pattern is unusual, I need to examine the hydraulic controllers directly. She led me to the production floor. 3 massive automated assembly lines, each one approximately 120 feet long, filled with robotic positioning systems, precision cameras, microscopic machining tools, and the hydraulic actuators that moved everything with thousandth of an inch accuracy. All silent, all offline, all costing PCM $240,000 per hour per line. The silence was eerie. These lines normally hummed with activity 24/7. Hundreds of robotic arms moving in synchronized precision, cameras flashing as they inspected components, conveyor belts carrying parts through dozens of manufacturing stages. Now everything was dead still except for the blinking red fault lights that cast an ominous glow across the factory floor. I spent the next 8 hours examining the hydraulic control system, reviewing fault logs, testing sensor readings, and tracing the cascade failure pattern. This was detective work, really. Following clues through layers of interconnected systems, looking for the one small thing that had triggered everything else to fail. By 6 p.m., I'd isolated the root cause, a software bug in the pressure compensation algorithm that managed hydraulic pressure variation across temperature changes. It was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its impact. Here's what happened. PCM's facility had experienced unusual temperature fluctuations over the past week. Outside temperatures ranging from 28 degrees to 58 degrees due to an unseasonable cold snap followed by a warm front. The hydraulic control system was designed to compensate for temperature-related pressure changes automatically. When it's cold, hydraulic fluid gets thicker and requires more pressure to maintain the same flow rates. When it's warm, the opposite happens. But the compensation algorithm had a subtle bug that accumulated rounding errors over multiple temperature cycles. Each time the temperature changed significantly, the algorithm would make a small adjustment and round the result to fit within the system's numerical constraints. Over 9 days of temperature fluctuations, those tiny rounding errors had accumulated like compound interest. After 9 days, The accumulated errors had pushed the hydraulic pressure outside of acceptable tolerance. Line B's system detected this deviation and triggered emergency shutdown protocols. Lines C and D were connected to the same hydraulic supply manifold and automatically shut down as a safety precaution when pressure anomalies were detected. The bug was in custom code that Titan had written specifically for PCM's installation 6 years ago. That code existed nowhere else in the world. I'd been part of the original team that designed and implemented it, working alongside 2 other senior engineers who had since left Titan. I was literally one of 2 people in the entire world who understood how this particular system worked. Fixing it required several steps: modifying the pressure compensation algorithm to reset accumulated errors periodically, updating the PLC firmware on all 3 production lines, recalibrating the hydraulic sensors to account for the modified algorithm, and then conducting a controlled restart sequence that verified everything was functioning correctly before restoring full production. I estimated 14 to 18 hours of work, complex but straightforward if you understood the system architecture. I started at 7:30 p.m. Tuesday night, working through detailed code modifications on my laptop while Diana and her maintenance team assisted with the physical aspects of the repair. By 1:30 a.m. Wednesday, I'd completed the algorithm modifications and was beginning the firmware update process. The updates had to be done sequentially: first line B, then C, then D, because they all shared certain control parameters that couldn't be updated simultaneously without risking system conflicts. I was halfway through uploading the updated firmware to line B's primary PLC controller when my phone rang. 2:47 a.m. Pierce Hoffman's name on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail. Nothing good ever comes from corporate calls at 2:47 a.m. But old habits die hard, and after 28 years of being the guy who always answers when there's a crisis, I picked up. That's when Pierce delivered the news that would change everything. After Pierce hung up, Diana approached me cautiously. She'd been watching from across the control room and could tell something was wrong. "Mr. Mitchell, is everything all right? You look concerned. I just got terminated by my employer while in the middle of fixing your production lines." Her expression went from concerned to horrified. "Terminated? But you're the only person who understands our system. What happens to our lines?" "That's an excellent question. Titan will need to send someone else to complete the work." "How long will that take?" I thought about it. Ryan Walsh was in Germany dealing with a client crisis for another 2 weeks. The other engineers at Titan had general manufacturing knowledge but no specific experience with PCM's custom hydraulic control systems. I honestly don't know. Ryan Walsh is our only other engineer with the expertise to handle this type of failure, and he's committed overseas for the next 2 weeks minimum. Diana's face went white. "We can't wait 2 weeks. Every day offline costs us $17.3 million in lost production. 2 weeks would be over $240 million in losses." I did the math in my head. 3 lines at $720,000 per hour, 24 hours a day, 14 days. She was right. $241.92 million to be exact. "Then I suggest you contact Titan Corporate and explain the urgency." At 3:15 a.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Walter Richmond, Titan's chief operating officer. Walter had been with the company for 25 years and understood exactly how critical my role was to client crisis management. I'd worked with him on dozens of emergencies over the years, and he knew what I was capable of. "Jordan, I just got off the phone with Pierce. There's been a misunderstanding about your employment status. We need you to complete the PCM engagement before we discuss any personnel matters." Walter Pierce was very clear. He said my employment was terminated effective immediately and I shouldn't bother coming back to the office. That's not a misunderstanding. That's termination. I understand this is confusing, but let's focus on resolving PCM's crisis first. We can address your employment situation after you've restored their production lines. I don't think that's appropriate. If I'm terminated, I shouldn't be working on Titan projects. If I'm not terminated, then Pierce needs to call me back and clarify that he made an error. This is a critical client situation, Jordan. PCM is one of our largest accounts. They're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars per hour. We need you to complete the repair work. Then you need to clarify my employment status first. Am I a Titan employee or not? There was a long pause. I could hear Walter thinking through the implications, probably doing the same math I was doing. If he said I was still employed, he'd be contradicting Pierce's termination and creating internal political problems. If he said I was terminated, he'd be admitting that Titan had just eliminated their crisis response capability in the middle of their most expensive emergency. Jordan, let me conference in Pierce so we can resolve this together. I'd rather you didn't. Pierce was clear about his decision. I'm respecting that decision by no longer working on Titan projects. If PCM needs assistance, they should contact Titan's emergency response line and request another engineer. There is no other engineer available who understands PCM's system. That's an unfortunate situation, but it's not my problem anymore since I'm no longer a Titan employee. I ended the call and looked at Diana, who was standing nearby having heard my side of the conversation. What should we do, Mr. Mitchell? You should contact Titan and request emergency engineering support. Explain the urgency of the situation. They'll prioritize getting someone here as quickly as possible, but you're here now. You understand our system. You were in the middle of fixing it. Can't you just complete the work? I was fired 37 minutes ago. I can't ethically continue working on a project for a company that just terminated my employment. Diana looked desperate. What if we hired you directly? Not through Titan, but as an independent consultant working for PCM? I thought about that carefully. Sarah's voice echoed in my head. Start your own consulting firm. Ryan's words. Why are you giving it away to people who don't appreciate it? For the first time in 28 years, those voices were starting to make sense. That would create contractual complications. PCM has a maintenance agreement with Titan. That agreement probably has exclusivity provisions preventing you from hiring outside engineers to work on Titan-designed systems. I'll check our contract. She pulled out her phone and called PCM's legal counsel. Had a rapid conversation about emergency repair provisions and third-party engineering support. Hung up and looked at me with cautious optimism. Our legal team says the maintenance agreement has exclusivity provisions for routine maintenance, but emergency repairs can be conducted by any qualified engineer if Titan cannot provide timely support. They're defining timely support as within 48 hours of request. Has PCM formally requested emergency support from Titan? I'll do that right now. She sent an email to Titan's emergency response team with me copied, formally requesting immediate engineering support for the production line failure and noting that their previous engineer was no longer available to complete the repair work. She marked it urgent and requested response within 4 hours. At 7:47 a.m., we received a response from Titan's emergency coordinator. We acknowledge your request for emergency engineering support. Our senior manufacturing systems engineers are currently committed to other client emergencies. We are working to identify available resources and will provide an estimated response timeline within 24 hours. 24 hours. That meant PCM would be offline for at least another full day, probably longer. At $720,000 per hour, that was another $17.3 million minimum in lost production. Diana showed me the email. What does this mean? It means Titan doesn't have anyone available to send. Ryan Walsh is in Germany managing another crisis, and apparently nobody else at Titan has the expertise to handle this type of failure. So we wait. Unless you want to exercise your contract provision and hire an independent consultant. Are you available as an independent consultant? The question hung in the air for a moment. This was the decision point. After 28 years of loyalty to Titan, after training Pierce and watching him climb the corporate ladder, after all those late-night calls and emergency flights and weekends spent in industrial facilities across the country, this was the moment where I had to choose. I could wait for Titan to sort out their personnel issues and probably get my job back with some face-saving explanation. Or I could take the leap that Sarah and Ryan had been encouraging me to take for years. I could be. What would your consulting rate be? Independent consulting rates for emergency manufacturing crisis response typically range from $400 to $800 per hour depending on expertise level and urgency. I was at the top of the expertise scale. This was definitely urgent. And frankly, I was feeling a little vindictive about the whole situation. $800 per hour for emergency crisis response, minimum 20-hour engagement to ensure complete resolution and system validation. That's $16,000 total, with payment terms of 50% deposit before I resume work, remaining 50% upon successful production line restoration. Diana didn't hesitate. Done. I'll have our CFO process the deposit immediately. At 9:30 a.m. Wednesday morning, $8,000 cleared into my personal checking account. At 9:45 a.m., I resumed work on PCM's hydraulic control system, but now as an independent consultant charging more per hour than I'd been making per week at Titan. The work went smoothly. By 11 p.m. Wednesday night, I'd completed the firmware updates and was beginning the sensor recalibration process. By 3 a.m. Thursday, I was conducting the controlled restart sequence for Line B. By 6 a.m., Line B was running at full production capacity with no faults. By 9 a.m., Line C was operational. By 1 p.m., Line D was restored and running normally. Total downtime, 62 hours. Total production loss, $44.6 million. But the lines were running again, and the fix I'd implemented would prevent recurrence of the temperature compensation bug. Diana was watching the production monitors with visible relief as components began moving through the assembly process again. The silence that had dominated the factory floor for 62 hours was replaced by the familiar hum of machinery, the rhythmic sounds of robotic arms moving in precision, and the soft whoosh of conveyor belts, carrying parts through their manufacturing stages. Mr. Mitchell, I cannot thank you enough. You saved us from a disaster that would have been catastrophically worse if we'd waited for Titan to send another engineer. You're welcome. I'll prepare a technical report documenting the failure cause and repair procedures. You should share that with Titan so they can update their systems documentation and prevent this from happening to other clients. Will you be available if we have questions during the follow-up period? Yes, my consulting arrangement includes 30 days of follow-up support for any issues related to this repair. I drove back to my hotel, exhausted but oddly energized. For the first time in years, I felt like I was being paid what I was actually worth. More than that, I felt respected. Diana and her team had treated me like the expert I was, not just another company employee following corporate protocols. At 11:47 p.m. Thursday night, I received a call from Walter Richmond. I was packing for the flight home, still processing everything that had happened. Jordan, I understand you completed the PCM repair work as an independent consultant. We need to discuss your employment status. Pierce's decision to terminate you was premature and poorly timed. We'd like to offer you reinstatement with full back pay and benefits. I appreciate that, but I'm declining. I'm now operating as an independent consultant, and frankly, it's working out better than I expected. What does that mean for Titan? You're our most experienced crisis response engineer. We can't afford to lose your expertise. It means Titan will need to develop other engineers with similar expertise or accept that your crisis response capability is significantly reduced. That's not acceptable. We have ongoing client emergencies that require your specific knowledge. Then Titan should have considered that before terminating me while I was literally in the middle of managing one of those emergencies. Jordan, I understand you're upset about how Pierce handled the situation. I'm not upset, Walter. I'm simply making rational business decisions based on new information. Pierce demonstrated that Titan doesn't value my contributions enough to avoid firing me during a crisis. I've learned from that demonstration. Now I'm valuing my contributions appropriately by charging market rates as an independent consultant. What would it take to bring you back to Titan? I'm not interested in coming back, but I'm willing to discuss limited consulting arrangements for specific emergencies where my expertise is genuinely necessary. What would those arrangements look like? Titan can retain me as an emergency crisis consultant. $1,200 per hour for active crisis work, $5,000 monthly retainer for availability and consultation, 6-month contract renewable at my discretion. I work remotely unless travel is absolutely necessary, and travel time is billed at the active crisis rate. My previous salary as senior manufacturing systems engineer had been $145,000 annually. I was now proposing a consulting arrangement that would cost Titan approximately $60,000 annually just for the retainer, plus potentially hundreds of thousands more if they actually needed me for crisis response. That's significantly more expensive than your previous compensation. That's correct, but it's less expensive than what happened at PCM when you didn't have me available. They lost $44.6 million during 62 hours of downtime. They would have lost over $240 million if they'd waited 2 weeks for Ryan Walsh to become available. My consulting rate is expensive. My absence is more expensive. Over the next 6 weeks, I received 11 emergency calls from former Titan clients experiencing manufacturing crises. Each call followed the same pattern. Critical production line failure. Titan couldn't send an engineer quickly enough. Could I help as an independent consultant? I helped all 11 clients. Total consulting revenue, $156,000 for 6 weeks of work. That was more than my entire annual salary at Titan, earned in a month and a half. Word spreads fast in the precision manufacturing industry. By May, I was receiving calls from companies that had never worked with Titan, asking if I was available for emergency crisis response and ongoing systems optimization consulting. When I told Ryan about my career change, his reaction was immediate. "Dad, I want in. Let's make this a family business." In June, Ryan gave his notice and joined me. Mitchell and Associates Crisis Response Engineering, father and son, 52 years of combined experience, available 24/7 for manufacturing emergencies. Sarah suggested the name and helped us set up the business structure. "I always knew you two would end up working together," she said. By July, we had 6 long-term consulting contracts with manufacturing companies who wanted guaranteed access to our expertise when they needed it. Combined monthly retainer revenue, $42,000, approximately $504,000 annually, plus additional project fees that often doubled that amount. In August, Titan formally offered me the consulting arrangement I'd proposed to Walter. I accepted because it was guaranteed revenue, and despite everything, Titan still represented one of the most reliable sources of emergency work in the industry. Pierce Hoffman lasted until September. The board terminated him after they calculated that his decision to fire me during the PCM crisis had cost Titan approximately $1.8 million in measurable losses. The breakdown was damning. PCM had reduced their annual maintenance contract with Titan by $450,000, citing concerns about response capability and reliability. 4 other major clients had similarly reduced their contracts after hearing about the PCM situation and Titan's inability to provide adequate crisis support. Titan had paid premium rates to fly Ryan Walsh back from Germany and reassign him to cover domestic emergencies I would have handled, incurring approximately $125,000 in expedited travel, overtime, and project disruption costs. And they were now paying me $60,000 annually in retainer fees, plus crisis rates that were nearly double my previous hourly equivalent. All because Pierce had decided to fire me at 2:47 a.m. while I was literally fixing a $720,000 per hour crisis. When Walter called to tell me about Pierce's termination, I felt no satisfaction, just a sense of professional justice. "We've learned from this situation, Jordan. We're restructuring our engineering management to ensure this kind of decision never happens again." "I hope so, Walter. For your sake and your client's sake." By late 2024, Mitchell & Associates was managing 22 long-term consulting relationships with manufacturers across the Midwest, South, and West Coast. Annual revenue was approaching $850,000. I was working approximately 60% of the hours I'd worked at Titan while earning nearly 6 times my previous salary. More importantly, Ryan and I were building something together. Every emergency call was an opportunity for him to learn, and every successful resolution was validation that we'd made the right choice. The most dangerous employee to fire isn't the one who complains about salary or threatens to quit. It's the one who's literally in the middle of solving a crisis that nobody else knows how to solve when you decide they're expendable. Pierce wanted to reduce headcount and eliminate what he saw as an expensive senior engineer. He got exactly what he wanted. The headcount was reduced and the salary line item disappeared from his budget. What he didn't anticipate was that my salary was actually insurance against the cost of manufacturing crises. He was paying $145,000 annually to prevent multi-million-dollar losses. When he eliminated that insurance, he immediately discovered why it existed. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong, it's letting them experience the full cost of being right about what they wanted. Your expertise isn't just what you know, it's what happens when you're not there to use it. The real value of specialized knowledge becomes visible only in its absence, when crises unfold and nobody else can step in to prevent the catastrophe. Loyalty is a contract that both parties must honor. Companies that treat experienced professionals as disposable cost centers rather than strategic assets will always pay more to replace what they destroyed than they ever saved by eliminating it.